Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are continuing an extended extended devotional series on the applications of biblical stories. And today we're going to look at Jonah. So Jonah is a minor prophet, and his story is in the book named after him, Jonah. And if we go to the third chapter, because that's kind of where we're going to start, the end of the third chapter, I'll tell you what happens in chapters 1 through 3 prior to that. So what happens to Jonah is as such. God asked Jonah to go to a city called Nineveh, okay? And when he's told to go to Nineveh, he's told to minister to these people. Well, he's got a problem with that idea, and so he doesn't want to go to the city. But he ends up going anyhow, and when he let me get that back. He does end up going anyhow, but let me tell you a little bit about the story because you probably have heard of Jonah. He doesn't go. He tries to get on a boat and go in the opposite direction. He gets thrown off the boat because there's a big storm that he believes is caused because he's not listening to God. He gets swallowed by a big fish, and he's in the belly of the fish for 3 days, and then he finally gets thrown out of the fish's belly and then decides to go to Nineveh. It's a really complicated story, but that's actually not the part of the Jonah story that we're going to focus on. So after he's thrown out of this big fish's belly, he says, "Fine, I'll go to the people of Nineveh and I'll tell them what you want me to tell them." And what God wanted Jonah to tell the people was a warning. He wanted to tell them, listen, if you don't change your ways, if you don't get better, if you don't get right in these situations, then you're going to suffer, you're going to pay, God's going to destroy this place, and he's going to cause suffering, death, because you've offended God with your behavior and the things that you've done. And so Jonah goes and tells the leader of Nineveh about this and warns them like God tells him to warn them. After he does such, we get into the third chapter of Jonah, and let's see what happens. Well, so at the end of Jonah 3, the people decide to listen. And so the king says, okay, no, you know what? I don't want to be a part of something that's not right. So the king of Nineveh heard what Jonah was saying. This is verse 6 of Jonah 3. Well, heard what Jonah was saying. He stepped down from his throne and took off his royal robes. He dressed himself in burlap and sat on a heap of ashes. And then the king and his nobles sent the decree throughout the city. And so they told everybody to mourn. I won't read that part. But this is a Old Testament way of mourning. People would rip their clothes or put on burlap, put ashes on, throw ashes. Sometimes they would cut their hair, but they would visibly go into mourning. And so the people of Nineveh did more than just repent and say, okay, we'll do something different. They literally mourned, and they asked everybody to mourn. The animals, even, everything was supposed to be sad because of what they had done to offend God. And when God saw that Nineveh had changed their mind, that's verse 10, then he stopped the plans that he had against them. He was like, oh, since they're not going to be disobedient, since they listened to the warning, I'm not going to destroy them. Okay, now is where we pick up our devotional application in Jonah 4. Jonah 4 starts with Jonah being very upset. Okay, so 4:1 says this change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. Now listen to what Jonah says in Jonah 4:2. So he complained to God about it. He says, "Didn't I say before I left home that you would do this, Lord? That is why I ran away to Tarshish," which was where he was trying to go on the boat before he got ate by the fish. "I knew that you are a merciful and compassionate God, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. You are eager to turn back from destroying people. Just kill me now, Lord. I'd rather be dead than alive if what I predicted will not happen." Okay, so what happened here? It becomes a really interesting application. Now, y'all might be thinking Jonah is kind of tripping. He's a little bit extreme. But here goes what you don't know. The people of Nineveh were really, 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 really very evil before they repented, okay? They were doing all kinds of human sacrifices. They put their enemies' heads on sticks and put them around the camp. Like, it was some really dastardly kind of stuff going on in the city of Nineveh. And so Jonah had developed resentment against Nineveh because they had been so evil and they had been doing such wrong things. Now, you might be thinking, well, still, everybody needs forgiveness. And that would be great if that was what we all thought all the time. The problem is that's not necessarily what we all think all the time. We think certain people deserve certain types of punishments. That's most people think this way. They're like, well, if you did that to us, you should get this. You shouldn't get mercy. You shouldn't get this. You should get this punishment that I've decided on. However, this story in Jonah compels us to be compassionate even to those who are, well, at the worst, brutal and evil and sadistic, because the city of Nineveh was known to be this way. And the people of Nineveh clearly were a part of, it wasn't the city itself, it was the people inside the city that were doing this brutality and behaving in these ways. But yet God says that he wants to be merciful to Nineveh because they changed their ways. And Jonah cannot agree. And it's weird to me because if you look at Jonah 4:1 and this passage that I just read, God, he's saying all these things, but he's angry. Like, he's saying good things. He's like, I knew you would be merciful. I knew you would be compassionate. I knew you would have unfailing love, which are all the things that we're so glad when God has toward us. But Jonah is not glad when he has it towards other people. And sometimes we're the same way. We're quick to say, God, help me, forgive me, make a way, work it out. And then when it comes to someone else receiving the same mercy or the same grace, we not only do we not extend it, like Jonah didn't want to extend it, but we don't want God to extend it either. Oh, they should burn for that. They should just be, I don't care. That's unexcusable. And we decide, right, what is good and what is evil. We have to be careful. And when we look at things like this and situations like this, there are many evils in this world and things that we feel are intolerable. But does that give us a right to decide for them who should receive mercy and who should not? I don't know. I'll leave that question with you, but I'll tell you the rest of the story of Jonah and Nineveh and then let you apply this application. Now, you might be thinking, well, Erica, I'm on the same page as you. I absolutely agree. Yeah, we should be merciful to who should be merciful. But what about when we gossip about people? Is that being merciful? What about when we're judging people and we're not even verbalizing that judgment? Is that being merciful? Sometimes we think of being not having mercy as something that has to be this big egregious thing like what Jonah is doing. He's protesting against the goodness of God, against Nineveh. And sometimes it's small microaggressions that we have towards other people that demonstrate that we have an issue with them and that we're not willing to be merciful to them. We have to evaluate all of it. Not just the big things. We have to also look at the small things. So let me finish telling you the story of Jonah and Nineveh. So Jonah gets angry. He has a whole temper tantrum, and then he goes away and he sits on a hill. He's like, God, I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to turn around. I knew you were going to be merciful. I knew you were going to be compassionate. Now I'm just going to go sit on this hill and wait for the destruction. Now, I don't know why he was going to wait for the destruction that was never going to happen. Okay. But he decides he's going to go anyway. He goes and sits on this little hill. And when he sits on the hill, God sends a tree to come and shade him, right? A little vine or branch or something grows up to protect them. And at the same time, a worm also manifests, okay? And the worm is like a cutworm or whatever. And so it eats away at the plant. And Jonah is enjoying the shade of the plant. But when he wakes up, the plant has been eaten by the worm and withered up and died. And Jonah gets super frustrated because he's like, oh man, this plant, how could you let the plant wither up and die? What's wrong? Why, is the plant messed up? And then we're at the end of Jonah, the 4th chapter. And what God says to Jonah is very interesting here. He says, listen, Jonah, you cared more about, this is verse 10. He says, you feel sorry about the plant, though you did not put it in, so you did nothing to put it there. And it came quickly and died quickly. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city? And so he's saying, look, you understand that the plant deserves compassion. You're sad when something happens to something of yours, but you have no compassion for other people. And you know what? This is interesting because it's a societal issue, right? We can degrade, badmouth, yell at, curse out all kinds of people because of what they've done to us. And yet we have animals. or plants that we don't want anything bad to happen. We'll fall on the ground and fall out if something happens to our pet. Not saying that we shouldn't love our pets, but these are human beings. We should love them too. We should care about them too. And remember when I talked about it, the way that we're being unmerciful might be ways that in which we can just talk negative to a person. We can just degrade a person. We can just gossip about a person. We don't mind being rude to a person or having these horrible ideations or even expressing these horrible things about a person, degrading people, treating them like things instead of human beings. We're fine doing that from time to time, but we don't want to lose something as simple as this plant that's growing behind me, or our dog gets sick and we fall all out on the ground. And we think that it's okay to feel this way about a person because we don't like the person or what they've done. But the message here in Jonah and the application for us is this: you don't have a right to be unmerciful just because you don't agree with the person or you don't like what they've done, or even they've done evil, because Nineveh was guilty of doing evil things. Let's just be real. But yet somehow God decides that they deserve mercy. And he's using Jonah's compassion toward the plant to demonstrate, listen, you have nothing to do with how this came about. And yet it's gone, or it's sick, or it didn't work out, and you're all falling apart and you don't care about these people. We've got to learn to value people. It's the story for Nineveh, but it's the story for us. How many times we look around and we see people degrading other people, treating people like things and not valuing them for who they are. The application is as such. We've got to learn to love people because God loves people. I'm praying for you. I hope that you're praying for Launching Legacies. And I hope that you spend some time in the book of Jonah. It's a very small book, so you should read it all if you wanted to. And if not, at least the 3rd and 4th chapter would be interesting. However, the point is this: how well do we regard others? Again, like I said, I'm praying for you. I hope you're praying for us. We'll see you again tomorrow with another of our devotionals. Until then, be blessed.